Hello everyone. Since this is either a highlight, a standalone book, or the first episode in a series, I'm jumping in to remind you what the rules are for this podcast. First rule is, no real people stories. That means that any details from our own lives are merely anecdotal, we do not read books about real people, and we are not reading historical fiction. The second rule is that we are basing our analyses off of how the author treats characters and what they put them through. We are not judging the accuracy of the trauma, the accuracy of any actual conditions that may be portrayed, nor the authenticity of a character's reaction to that trauma or that particular condition. This podcast is for entertainment purposes only. The hosts are not trained professionals, and their opinions come solely from personal experience. In this episode, we discuss fictional depictions of trauma and violence that may not be suitable for all audiences. Please take care of yourselves. Specific content warnings for each episode can be found in the show notes. Events in the media are discussed in approximate order of escalation. This episode contains spoilers.
This week we are discussing Daja's book, the third book in Tamora Pierce's series, Circle of Magic. We have two guests with us from the Circle of Friendship podcast, and we hope you enjoy our discussion as we talk about the different ways that Daja tackles various things going on in her life.
Hi, I'm Nicole.
And I'm Robin, and today on Books That Burn, we have some guests. Can you introduce yourselves?
I'm Anna, and I am one of the co-hosts of the Circle of Friendship podcast, where we talk about all things Emelan.
I'm MJ, and I am the other co-host of the Circle of Friendship podcast, where we talk about all things Emelan.
And they're joining us to talk about Daja's book by Tamora Pierce. So, let's get into our factions. First, we have Daja, Sandry, Triss, Briar, Frostpine, Nico, Rosethorn, Lark, Polyam, Yarun, Vedris, and the Lady Enolia. For our first topic, it is Frostpine and child abuse. So, anyone want to get into this?
Thoughts on this? This is a really... So, I want to just... kind of, I guess, preface this topic with a little bit of nuance, because our topic is child abuse, but the thing that is happening here is manipulation of Frostpine's magic without consent. So this is also definitely a consent topic.
Yep.
And we see Frostpine's trauma come out in the book. Like, that's how we even know about this, is that he has almost a PTSD flashback, and doesn't use exactly that words, but he describes it as a flashback, an emotional flashback in this
because
book.
of something non-harmful that happens with Daja.
Yeah.
Well, non-harmful.
This very particular instance is not harmful.
It didn't turn out harmful.
Okay.
At the time, Frostpine, I don't think, had any reason to assume it would be non-harmful.
Right.
It's one of those that it could have been very bad.
With Daja, there was no consent issue. It was to fix an ongoing problem. It wasn't abuse.
Right. I'm just saying that, like, Frostpine definitely just saw the thing happening again, and that was it.
Right.
Yeah, he was triggered by a similar occurrence.
Yes. And, like, his parents, they sold his magic basically, like, as soon as he was born, it sounds like.
I almost even want to call it magical slavery? Indentured servitude? There is a thing, because they didn't just, like, they sold it for money.
Right.
And the reason I'm leaning towards slavery over indentured servitude is just because it was non-consensual. Like he did not sign himself up for this.
No.
And, like, slavery is a thing that exists in the world of these books, and, like, some later books, there's a character who was sold into slavery at one point.
That's why I'm saying magical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. But yeah, like a part of him is taken away and not for his use anymore. Like, and he has zero consent or ability to do anything with it. And when he was this person dies and he gets his magic back, his parents were like, "What's your problem? Why are you upset?" And he gets just like gaslit by them.
Yeah. His parents told him that it was for his own good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Ugh. Gross.
Yep.
And we touched on this
now
a little bit.
Go ahead.
Oh, we touched on this in our podcast when we pursued this chapter, but the way that it's described is very clearly like child predation.
Yeah.
Because the way he talks about his discomfort, this guy was always watching him. He could tell something was wrong, but he was being gaslit by his family who was telling him, no, everything's fine. That is a very real world experience for any number of types of child abuse, where like as a child, you're being constantly undermined and told that this is fine, you're wrong, your instincts are incorrect, even if you know deep down that something's wrong.
Yeah. And he didn't have any reason to think, oh, the explanation is that I have magic and they're selling it. Like, he had no idea at all until he was in his teens and suddenly all of his magic came back. Magic that he then didn't know how to control, didn't know how to use, had to, like, just get away and find help and figure it out.
Yeah.
Poor Frostpine. I'm just sad. Just sad thinking about Frostpine.
Yeah.
He suffered so much.
And in terms of, like, its place in the book, like, one thing this series does is when, like, the adults talk about their trauma, it's usually, like, very restricted and just in one chapter. One chapter where you get the explanation. Right, like one chapter where you get the explanation, but you can see the effects on their behavior, like, separate from that. It's not like all of it is super neatly confined or something. Like, Frostpine is, like, he's very, very careful about people's boundaries.
He's exceedingly
deliberate.
Like, actually, in our MJ, if either of you have a thought on just his treatment of Daja when she first starts working.
100%. We've talked about this in Circle of Friendship, where a lot of the teachers, but Frostpine especially, is very deliberate in, I need to share your power, but you must give me consent to do so. He's always checking in to make sure you're okay, where there's no imbalance between us, you fully consent, etc., etc.
And that balance part, by the way, is wild, considering the strength disparity.
Yeah.
Like, good Lord, like, that takes a lot of control on the teenager's part.
I mean, even in the, spoiler alert, forest fire, like, checking in, handling stuff off, Daja's totally in control of, like, how power is getting used. No one's, like, being grabbed and made to help. Everybody's volunteering, like, and there's a lot. Like, I wish we got more of Frostpine's backstory, like, more than just this. But, like, I guess we do get, like, cool stories of him, like, as an adult, and, like,
I think, like, we also get an insight into him in another later book.
Yeah. There is one where we definitely learn a lot more about him. He's just, like, a really cool character. I think that's most of what I have for him.
Okay. What do you guys, anything else you guys are thinking? This one?
The one thing that kind of sticks out for me in this is that Frostpine has shown himself to be very close with the other teachers. in terms of them knowing about his past and knowing about his history, and often being the ones to explain some things about, like, the more funny parts of it to the students. And in this case, I think there's very strong evidence that this was so traumatic for him that he never talked about it, because I don't think Lark specifically would ever have signed off on this without talking to him first, had she known it was going to be a trigger for him.
Yeah, definitely.
And that, to me, just helps drive home the gravity of what he went through and of how traumatic it was for him, because it affected everything in his life. It affected the thing, Smith work, which he already loved doing, he could no longer do because he had magic, and it was destroying his tools would melt. Like, he just couldn't control it all of a sudden when the magic came back to him and when he realized what was done to him. And so recovering and rebuilding from that trauma must have been such a feat. Even if we don't see exactly what he did, we get these kind of sort of subtle examples throughout the chapter of just how much this affected him and what it took to get to the point where he's now probably, arguably, the most powerful Smith mage in the world.
Yeah.
If not the only.
Well, oh man.
Other than
only would
Daja,
be very
obviously.
sad.
But
Ambient Smith mage.
Ambient Smith mage,
like
yeah. Because since he's been looking for someone else for 20 years as his.
The only part is so, well, okay, can we touch on that very quickly?
Yeah.
Because he's been looking, he didn't have this thing. And, like, I think isn't there a description of him saying that, you know, he felt like there was something dead about
missing,
the metal?
I believe is the word. Oh, yeah.
Something missing, like
Well,
reaching
he
for a
had
tool
multiple
and finding
descriptions.
it's not there.
Yeah, like, and then he gets this thing back and discovers, you know, that this was deliberately traumatic, that it didn't have to have been that way, all of this other stuff. And then to be all alone with it.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, this is going to sound very obvious, but that's super isolating.
It is.
Yeah.
I'd love
Like,
to know how
man.
who he talked to. How did he learn about
Yeah.
this? If he is the only ambient Smith mage that he knows of, unless there was some other mentor that has long since passed on or something, like, how did he come back from that?
My best bet is that it was probably like some other ambient mage, and that he'd also learned smithing separately. And so someone helps him get a grip on his power, and then he's able to kind of meld them. But, like, yeah, having to do that with not very much guidance. I mean, you see how much trouble Triss has in later books with, like, having a power that is not shared with her mentor, and how much work goes in to...
I'm not even talking about guidance or a mentor.
Oh, yeah, but feeling alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Camaraderie with peers.
Yeah.
And it actually, well, it is kind of interesting because obviously Rosethorn is not the only plant ambient mage.
Mm-hmm.
I think they talk about that.
And we learned that, like, stone mages are super common. Like, there's kinds of ambient mages that are really common.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's common and uncommon. But, like, the three teachers, I'm not including Nico because he doesn't just live and work and, you know, he's part of the group, but, like...
He's not an ambient mage, I don't think.
No, he's not. He's an academic mage. And he doesn't serve the temple.
But as far as, like, a teacher squad, he's part of that group, but, you know... But the three ambient mages who are their teachers, they all have kind of, like, there is something about them that, you know, they just didn't have anybody else, and then now they're a group, which is really cool. But they also don't have any magic in common with each other. Which is, like, I mean, like, and you don't have to have, you know, that one, like, it would be like me not having, like, music in common with my best friends. Like, okay, that's fine. It doesn't really matter. But, like, for Frostpine specifically, that isolating effect, like, he has, you know, he has, like, his most likely other two best friends, but then Daja shows up and it's like his whole world is just better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just like, oh, good. It's not only me forever now. And, like, he's so excited to show her what she can do and how the metal works. And like, I just love like her reaction in this book when, or no, not in this book, in a previous book from her point of view, when he has her like touch metal underneath a cloth.
Oh yeah.
So she can't see it and she has to tell him what it is. Her reaction to how the metal makes her feel, just, you know, she's like, oh, it's, you know, the gold is so happy. And he's like, oh yeah. I'm so glad that you liked working with it too. It likes you back. And like, that's very much a scene that's framed as being about Daja, but like there's a lot of Frostpine in it. And just joy at like, yes! It's alive, and so are you, like, you know, you can tell you're with me in it. It's just really cool.
Yeah. It must also be really satisfying to be able to finally pay things forward.
Yeah.
And to teach the love to someone else who's going to be receptive to it, who's going to understand it. But I did also want to highlight one other thing before we wrap this section up, where the way Daja responds to Frostpine sharing this information, sharing his trauma with her, she processes it, recognizes what he needs from her, which is, I promise to never put myself in a situation where someone can take my magic and put me through something similar to what you experienced. I promise that I will always think twice before doing something like this. I will never give my magic away freely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's really important when you're trying to help someone through their trauma. You recognize what it is that they need, and you give it to them without trying to tell them, oh, but that was so long ago. I think you're overreacting. None of that.
And even if she just said, like, oh, I'm sorry that happened to you, he's like, enough about me. I need this not to happen to you. Stay focused. Yeah. Or like that kind of a thought. But no, like, yeah, she reacts in a way that seems to be what he needed. Yeah.
I just appreciate them both so much.
On to Polyam and disability. In case you're not familiar with these books, Polyam is the character's name. Yes, we know.
We are aware.
We are aware. It sounds like about 2 years before the events of this book, she was injured in a rock slide on shale. If you know anything about shale, you know that it is knives, the rock. And she
Oops, all knives.
Slid
edition.
along it and lost an eye, was cut to the bone all along one side of her body, lost one leg from the thigh down. I don't know if it was directly from the shale or from it having been cut to the bone. Like, either way, it's from this incident.
I had honestly always kind of pictured that, like, her leg just got cut up a lot and then maybe was rotting.
Yeah, probably amputated. But, like, we don't have that level of detail on it.
We don't have visceral details of her struggles.
Yeah. This did not happen on the page.
No.
Yeah, thankfully, because that would be, like, a very different feel.
Yeah.
That would feel more like battle magic.
Yeah.
I was going to say that would feel more like Briar's book.
Yay
for Briar-centered books. Anyway, like, genuine yay, but also... okay. And so, like, this is a relatively recent injury, and it meant that, like, overnight, she lost her status, she lost her craft, because she, like, her job was to break horses, to train horses, and there's a certain level of able-bodiedness that you need in order for that to be a safe job, especially in a world without our modern level of technology in a lot of ways. And this injury means that she doesn't have that, like, just
straight
overnight.
Up does not.
Yeah.
Her life just completely changed.
Yeah. And then in addition, because of trader custom, she becomes very much demoted in rank and ostracized to a certain degree, because she becomes the Wirok, who is the person who trades with outsiders, and that's looked down upon and degraded. So
because she spends the caravan's money instead of creating opportunities to bring money into the caravan.
Yeah.
Just such a wild, like, can we just talk on that for a second? That is a wild, so, all right, on the one hand, yes, the traders are all about turning a profit. And so, you know, the more money you bring in, the higher status you are. But it's wild to me that this implies that they do fully understand and know that if you don't spend money, you won't make money. But they've also at the same time decided that the person who does that thing that makes the rest of their everything possible is a terrible person inherently. And they're just like, okay, can I just relate it to another book real quick? It's just like it's not a theme, but like it feels a very similar feel to this.
Mm-hmm.
In a different book, we have a culture where they have a whole cast of people whose job it is to essentially be sanitation workers.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And they are quite literally shunned, and people treat them as though they are invisible. And if you're born in part of this cast, you have to wear certain clothing to designate the fact that you are dirty. And, like,
yeah.
The traders don't go that far. But it has a very similar feel of, like, okay, well, you're necessary, but that's gross. Like,
and I wonder if a little bit of how they dislike merchants is because merchants, the individual merchant, will both buy and sell. Like, they don't split it. So, like, I was just mulling over how they can justify disliking merchants and looking down on merchants when they are literally traveling merchants. And I think it's because merchants will do both halves and they only consider one of the halves to be good. Even though you need both. Like, you have to buy the thing to sell it later, people. Especially when they don't do, like, a thing I was mulling over when I say that Polyam lost her status in her craft. I'm like, Polyam would not like me calling it a craft.
No, Polyam would be offended.
Luxia have crafts. Traders don't have crafts. Traders have
a calling,
expertise, specialties, and things they are good at that are definitely not crafts. No.
There's such a superiority complex in trader culture.
And in merchant culture, but
culture, but like, we don't get a close-up on merchant culture.
True.
It also reminds me of how they treat the concept, how they treated Daja when she survived her near-death experience.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
And it's like, they treat Polyam terribly for being the person that needs to spend the money of the caravan in order to do things like maintenance and repairs and buy and buy materials that they need to cook and everything like that. And then they have someone.
She didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm kind of shocked she didn't end up Trangsi for surviving the rock slide.
Right?
Like,
I feel like her mom literally being the caravan owner.
Oh yeah,
I feel like
might have dragged her up from that.
I feel like it is way less lucky to be the person who went down the side of a mountain than to be the one person who survived a shipwreck.
I think it's because
the thing with Daja's luck. Okay, go ahead.
I think it's because no one died. I think that death is specifically what's considered the
That's
bad
a very
luck.
good point.
And so Polyam survived, but she wasn't surrounded by death. And that would be my read with just based contextually on it, that Daja survived, but she didn't just survive a shipwreck, she survived and everyone else died. So the people around her were unlucky, therefore she must be a focal point for bad luck.
Yeah,
that is valid.
That was the assumption that I had too, is just, it's not that it's not even like, it's not the injuries that matter. It's the fact that somehow, when everyone else was harmed, you were not. Clearly, you brought the spirit here. Clearly, you are the luck that it caused everyone else, because, you know, a parasite won't kill its host? ?
Yeah.
Which is not a line in this book. That's me theorizing.
Right.
That's me relating it to something else that is totally different. But that's the, like, metaphor that I...
It's also...
But as for her, like...
Oh, no, go ahead.
I was going to move on to her actual disabilities. So if you have a thing that's not that, let's do that first.
That's what I was going to do too.
Okay.
No, that's exactly where I was going.
Okay, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, in addition to the fact that she now has lost her craft, she has lost her status in society, in their society, she also is now dealing with with adapting to a new level of mobility and in a very painful injury that continues to cause her pain to this day. Like if she rides for too long, even though she does have a walking aid, if she rides for too long or walks for too long, it pinches, it hurts. She's obviously much less agile than she used to be. So more agile than I would be after like less than 2 years. She moves quite quietly and sneaks up on people a lot in this book with her wooden leg, but which I feel like is probably a point of pride for her. But
I have a really sad thought about that.
Yeah.
She sneaks up on people because otherwise they leave because they're trying to avoid her in the caravan.
Yeah. Oh, no. Yeah. She's trying to be unobtrusive.
Yeah.
I also think she's kind of a, like, pot stirrer and, like saying, like, ha, you thought you could pull one over on me.
Yeah, definitely.
Guess what? I can still sneak up on you.
And, like, it's not just that, like, she has such a different level of mobility. It's that her previous position was so dependent on, like, physicality and being agile and, like, being able to, like, physically do all these things, that the gap between that is very large. And when it comes with all these other changes, like, it's... And can we talk about how they were going to make... Because they, as far as I can tell, she no longer actually has to do the thing where she washes in every pond and stream because of, like, events at the end of the book. But they were going to make the person who's missing half of a leg bathe in every pond and stream and wash the donkey too.
Yep.
For, like, I think it was, like, 10 days after.
Yeah.
That is, having the donkey too would be hellish, even if she had, like, full use of all of her limbs.
Yeah.
This is just like...
And pointing out,
oh my goodness.
This is not you have to wash. This is no one else can touch you or acknowledge you or see you or until you wash.
We talked about this a little bit.
She doesn't get an aid. She's not getting help.
Yeah. We talked about this a little bit in Circle of Friendship, where it's a kind of slap in the face in terms of accessibility, because she's a person who doesn't have full range of motion, and you're going to force her to do something that makes her life 10 times more difficult instead of just have another person go through the cleansing ritual to be on hand for when she needs help. Like, that would be more accessible. Or, you know, not have this at all.
Just don't ostracize
I prefer
your people.
that.
Yeah.
But if I'm trying to find accessibility within your limitations and your culture, you could have done that. That is a thing you could have done.
It also feels like an extra slap when, like, I feel like we've slipped a little bit into talking about what the characters do to each other rather than what the author did with the character. But very briefly, she has to, like, wrangle this donkey, which I feel like would be just a constant reminder of how much she is not able to wrangle horses right now.
Yeah.
Like, that seems like that would suck extra with that. But as for what, like, the author does with this character, at the end of the book, for Daja to, like, repay her personal debt for Polyam for creating the opportunity for Daja's own debt that we're going to get to talk about to be wiped away, they make her an artificial limb.
Yeah.
That can move like a real limb. And I am so happy that the end of this, that, you know, with this disabled character, that, like, the outcome is Daja finds out that making mobility aids is a thing that she can do now. Because we get hints through, like, the rest of the thing that that's kind of, like, still a thing she does.
Yeah.
On and off, at least, as people need it. And that we do this here to, like, it feels like it's this book like starts out with people in very like uneven and bad situations and does a lot of work to get them to a much better place by the end of it. And I really appreciate that, because it feels like even if the characters aren't necessarily all like caring about each other and doing things that are accessible, the book leaves people in a better, more accessible place.
Yeah.
At the end.
100%.
And proves that you don't need to use magic to fix disability. You can use magic to make mobility aids.
Yeah.
Kind of
Yeah.
easily.
Yes.
And other authors and content creators don't need to automatically go to, and then we magically restored their eye, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Not a word about the eye. She just can walk now.
Yeah.
And walk. And, and even there's little bits of like, put oil in the joints this often. And like, there's ongoing maintenance things that will now be much easier for her to do, because when she uses this mobility aid, she has more spoons to do everything else. Like, obviously not like the book uses that language, but
Yeah. That's the intention.
Yeah.
Well, and kind of talking on like, what the author does with the characters. I do want to say, for anyone listening to this who has not read these before and is, deciding whether or not they want to handle it, it is consistent throughout this whole entire series. I'm not gonna, MJ or Anna, you guys can, if you want to speak more on the author as a whole. I don't actually remember how much this is a thing in other series of hers or not. But at least in this series, characters calling out things for being terrible as they happen, even if they're not fixed yet, even if they're not even part of the situation, even if, but not just going, ooh, a character suffers and we move on. Like, that does not happen in this series. Briar makes a bad decision and is going to harm somebody. He immediately gets called out by maybe his teacher, maybe someone else, maybe one of his sisters. Like,
I feel like overall that happens much more in the Emelan series than it does in the Tortal universe.
Yeah.
I feel like the Tortal universe lets things linger and be bad and not caught out for like a lot longer, because it has a different cadence to its arcs.
I think
Yeah.
early Tortal does
Early
what you're
Tortal
saying.
especially.
And then as we progress to like Protector of the Small, even Trickster's Choice and Trickster's Queen, especially Becca Cooper, there's a lot more of like, you see that this is bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can see that, yes?
is that just an author developing as an author thing, do you think, then?
Probably.
Timeline-wise?
I think it's a
I
little
think
of
it might
both.
be. I believe that she genuinely improves.
Yeah, it's just something that, like, here, even, there's so many things, like, in this book especially, but in really all of these books, there's so many things that are not really okay, and the author has set up the world, so the author made them not okay, but the author also spends the entire time having characters go, do you see this?
Yeah,
That's not okay.
that makes it
Yeah,
There's
later.
nothing I can do about it, but it's not okay.
that
and
makes it a
it's
critique,
good.
and
Yes.
it makes it looking at real world things, so that way we can critique it and compare it to our world and our experiences, which I think is worthwhile.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
it's awesome.
I also think it's
very
partially
cathartic to read.
Yeah. I also think it's partially that because Tortal was her first series and she set it up as a fairly like standard quote unquote medieval fantasy world, everything from then on is working kind of within that framework. So it's more about showing that things are bad and then taking a while to get there, whereas Emelan seems to have been crafted later and was crafted as a much more, not totally across the board, but what we see a little bit more of an egalitarian society. And so when those things do come up, it's less, here we are living in this rigid structure of a world, and this is the bad things that happen within this rigid structure of a world. So I think part of it is, like, I often see with a lot of what happens in Becca Cooper as kind of like crossing between Tortal and Emelan and how things work, even with like Farmer Cape's magic and things like that. There's also been theories that are not
I have
supported
the strongest feelings about Becca Cooper.
by anything or anyone. And I think Pierce has like said, no, that Emelan is Tortal like 300 years in the future-ish. Or not necessarily Tortal itself, but that world, because of how much more like technological development there is, and
okay,
and just like a lot of other
My theory
things.
is that Emelan and Tortal are across the sea from each other.
That's also a theory that she's been like, no, they're just completely different worlds. But yeah, like, so this is like a fan theory that people have
existences.
said.
Please don't give me a giant thing.
That Farmer Cape is like one of the first ambient mages, and it's a whole thing. Anyway.
The thing that makes me think that...
But yeah, I think it's partially an author choice and partially what she created.
The thing that makes me think no way is Emelan just future Tortal is that Tortal has an entire book series about how they get rid of slavery so that Tortal doesn't have slavery even though its neighbors do. And so when Emelan does, that I think is the biggest thing to make me say, no, I really hope Emelan isn't the future, because that would mean that this positive change got erased. I am much happier with the idea that they are completely separate universes.
Yep.
Well, I mean...
Yeah, but that is very far away.
It's very far away. I
Polyam.
do have one more. I just want to say that the magic works very differently in the two universes.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, that is a big, like, no, these are not the same planes of existence. Like,
yep.
I also do think it's funny talking about the way her, like, treatment of those things changes, because I read the Alana series, and then I was like, okay, this is cool. I really liked, because, the concept of, well, in this world where women can't be knights, this one woman then does the thing. I was like, ooh, that sounds like a thing that I would totally do. I really relate to this. And I don't really like a lot of the rest of the story. And so I read it a lot, and then I found other things that also kind of grabbed that need for me. And I immediately stopped reading Alana. And then Protector of the Small came out, and I was like, oh, this feels better. But now it's no longer a story that I relate to. But I liked it better, and I think it might have been that character treatment shift. But then it wasn't a thing I related to. And then this series came out, and I was like, oh, okay, no, this is my favorite now, and I just don't read her other stuff. And it's not because I don't like her other stuff, it's because I just grabbed a hold of this particular series and was like, nope, this is the one I'm going to read 20 million times. This has everything that I'm looking for.
These are my children, and I will protect them.
Yeah. I do think it's funny because I think that treatment or lack of treatment with her characters, I think definitely plays a big part of how comfortable I felt reading it.
Yeah.
Because Alana is like you said, like, things just happen. And then it happened, and it's like, okay, well, and this series does none of that. This series is consistent and loud about yelling when things are happening that are bad, even if there's nothing in universe that the characters can do about it.
Yeah.
All I want is textual acknowledgement. That's all I really want. The bar's so low.
Yeah.
This is why I have problems with the wise man sphere. We'll talk about it off air.
Okay.
Sounds good. On to Daja and ostracization. So because she was the only survivor of the shipwreck that killed her whole, is it clan, ship? What's the right term for traders?
I think
basically her whole family.
Third ship, Kasubo.
Yeah.
It is her whole family.
Because it's not caravan. Oh, yeah, so
Caravan.
it killed everyone except for her on third ship, Kasubo. And because she's the only survivor, she's considered unclean, bad luck. At the very start of the book, Polyam refuses to even acknowledge her and has to do a special ceremony in order to be able to speak to her as though she exists. The contortions that she goes through to speak and not speak to her are quite funny, but also sad.
Yes,
early on.
definitely.
I think it definitely feels like it was set up a little bit to be like just funny enough that it wasn't heartbreaking to read.
Yeah.
But not making
I also
light of
really
it.
love not making light of it at all. Just it's a humorous attempt.
I
kind
do
of.
think that one of the
Not
funniest
by the
bits
author,
in the book
by the character. It's humorous the way she refuses to acknowledge.
One of the funniest spots in the book is when Sandry asks what shade of yellow the special ceremony paint is.
Yeah.
And Polyam is like, I call it yellow. Move on.
I am not entertaining you.
Yeah.
Do you mind if I read a quote?
Very good. Go for it.
Sure.
I have no choice but to stand here and hope someone will tell me where I can find the smith. That's Polyam talking, realizing that the person she'd been trying to talk to is someone that she's not supposed to talk to.
So she's just going to stand there and ignore her until someone else comes along.
Which is equal parts funny and sad, as we said, because she can't even communicate.
But with Daja realized right away that Polyam was a traitor, and so was doing her part as the person who's bad luck, because she still believes the traitor stuff. It's her people, it's her culture. She's only been away from them for a couple of months. It's 3 books in, so it's easy for me to forget that this is not a lot of time since she lost her whole family.
Mm-hmm.
It's been 6 months.
She realizes immediately that Polyam is a traitor, and so she is doing her part and not answering Polyam back. And then after Polyam thinking that Daja is rude for a couple sentences, she figures out what's going on, and then that
was just frustrating. It's a frustrating moment in the book because Polyam is just excuse me, and Daja's over here oh my god, you're gonna not want to talk to me in 10 seconds anyway. I don't feel like talking to you to tell you to. There it is. Yeah. Just this moment, and then Daja's oh, there it is. She saw the staff.
Yep.
Okay. Speaking of what we touched on in our last topic of the author not just letting things happen without calling it out, Daja calls for help because Triss is out back moderating her fire for her. And so Daja is literally please get in here because I need literally anybody other than me that this person will acknowledge. Daja has to bet Triss, stop reading and help me. And Triss is okay, fine. And then Triss yells at Polyam for ignoring Daja, which is my favorite moment of the scene. Because Triss comes in and is hi, you treating my sibling like this makes no sense. Just talk to her. And then Daja's trying so hard to be but it's my culture and we can't disrespect this. And Triss is basically over here going, hi, that's not okay. Just it being your part of your culture doesn't mean that treating you like this is fine.
Yeah, Daja,
Triss
gets totally worked up on Daja's behalf.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We also see that
barking.
We see that with the teachers throughout the book. They're much more respectful and tactful about it. Yeah. When discussing another culture, but they do get frustrated throughout the book with the fact that this person that they care about and they care for and are raising is treated so poorly by the culture from which she came.
Because, all Daja would have to do to not have this happen is give up her staff and not have anyone know that she's a traitor. But, she doesn't because it's important to her. It's her culture. It's her people. And for her, the way that she is specifically excised from that culture is still part of the culture that she's actively participating in by carrying her staff. And that doesn't make the ostracization her fault in any way. It is absolutely not. But I appreciate that the solution from the author wasn't for Daja to abandon her culture, even if the only bit she still had access to was the way she'll get actively shunned if she runs into anybody else.
Also, she did have an experience where she tried to leave that part of her behind, and she found out it was way worse for her.
Yeah.
Wait, which bit?
She left.
She left her staff in her room and got beat up.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. That is. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Wasn't sure if that's what you meant.
It is such an interesting contrast where, like you said, like the adults are like, okay, well, we have to be very respectful of this other culture, but also, part of their culture is literally harming a strata of their population, and like it's that you can hear that frustration, and then the kids, especially Triss, are just like, well, they're harming my best friend and adopted sister. So I have no patience and I don't care, and I will have them be mad at me because I'm protecting you.
Yeah.
I think it's just really well written. It's a really good setup where, no, the culture is not being disrespected, but the characters who care about Daja still have kind of a space to defend her. But also, I will say this, speaking of respecting other people's cultures, nobody, literally 0 people in Daja's circle try and take over and force her to something interact. Daja leads. It's always her call. If she wants to walk away, her entire like family magic friend group goes, awesome, bye. If she wants to stay, they will do everything they can to help. If she needs a buffer, they're right there for her. They're ecstatic when they're allowed to tell the traitors that they can't talk to her. They're excited about it. But also, that wasn't their decision. It was hers. And she kept full control of her interactions the entire time. And so there's this call out, but there's no infringing on her autonomy, and there's no trying to erase or take over or dismiss her culture at all. And it's just it feels like such a very good balance of calling out of some pretty terrible practices, but also not being disrespectful. And I just like the flip where I just really, really, really like the contrast and dynamic where when Daja does not want to talk to Polyam, Triss is like, bye, yes. And then Daja does, and Triss is like, okay, fine, what do you need? Like, sure, okay, all right.
And also there's a nice mix of, like, cross-group conversations and then, like, the in-group conversation that Daja and Polyam have, like, including the one at the end where it's like, do you ever think that, like, they're more right and our people more wrong? And it's like, yeah, I do think that sometimes.
I love that conversation.
As they're, like, yeah, where they're, like, acknowledging, like, these are our people, this is our practice, but, like, this does a lot of damage, huh? Yeah, it does a lot of damage. Like, it especially sucks when you're the one that it's hurting.
Yeah.
And, like, but it doesn't, there is no, like, now we have to make the traitors stop doing this writ large. Like, it's not, yeah, because, like,
I think it's really important that final conversation happens between Daja and Polyam, and it happens with just Daja and Polyam. Like, none of the other kids tagged along. It's just them observing the beautiful parts and the ugly parts of their culture and discussing the nuance.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that conversation does happen after a really beautiful passage describing traitor culture through Daja's loving eyes.
Yeah.
You know, like, where she's describing, like, having spent her whole life around people who moved like this, spoke like this, decorated this way, had all these customs and things. Like, yeah, I definitely appreciate how much we get to see the bits that she loves about it, because until now, we really haven't gotten to see it for obvious reasons, because she's not with her people. But then also, like, at the end, she doesn't go with them, because if she had gone with them, she would have to give up, like, being a mage. And even if she didn't have to give up all of being a mage, she'd have to give up all but part of it, and she'd definitely have to give up smithing. And circling back briefly to, like, Frostpine's thing, like, I feel like the placement of his story in this book is really appropriate, because you have kind of like the opposite of the situation that Daja could have decided to end up in, because he had smithing, but he didn't have magic, and she's being offered magic, but you don't get to smith anymore. And both of them needed both parts of it. And so I think that juxtaposition is really nice. And I don't know if it's trying to be a direct contrast for the two situations, but I think it's definitely, they're well placed in relation to each other in this book.
I agree. I think also by Frostpine explaining how when he did get his magic back, how it almost killed him and how it felt to not have full access to the thing that was such an integral part of him without him really knowing it. I think that set things up for Daja as well, because by agreeing to go with the traitors, she would then be agreeing to that life, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And knowing how hard it was for Frostpine, can she really do that to herself?
Yeah. So then, one last thing with, like, Daja still being ostracized, but, like, trying to save people. The bit at the end with the fire, she's yelling that there is a fire, and they're like, no, we can't hear the Tranksea. Nope. No. We don't know you're here. And she's like, I will rust everything if you do not stop right now. And they're like, we definitely can't hear that, but we are coincidentally totally stopping and not doing anything else. Like, it's, like, this book, like, is, I don't know, just in terms of, like, the author portraying this, there's no, like, it's not like you have, like, people randomly conspiring and, like, going around the ostracization or anything. Mm-hmm. Like, even Polyam talking to her is completely within the constraints of these rules and this culture. And I appreciate the way, it's calling out what's wrong with it without dismissing it.
Right.
Just consistently. But then, like, in this series, there are times where what you need to do is, like, stop the thing, which we'll have in one of our other episodes.
Yeah. I have one last thought. I'm not going to spoil it. I know technically we can talk about spoilers, but this is such a good moment that I don't want to ruin it. But I do just want to make an observation of the very end without spoilers, without actually saying what happened. I really love the reaction of the traitors to Daja's solution to the forest fire.
Mm-hmm.
Everything in their culture. So that all I'm going to say is that we know canonically, and this has been talked about basically since the beginning of Sandry's book. Daja talks about it all the time. It is a part of her culture. It is a major part of what influences a lot of the rest of traitor culture. But this idea of everybody's book needing to be balanced, and you can do bad things and that gives you a bad mark. But then if you do good things, then you get a good mark, and you owe people. And then they owe you, and then you cancel that debt by repaying them, and, like, just this very, like, obligatory culture. Actually, what we had kind of mentioned in our other topic, this is the reason why, you can, like, you can't, like, earn your way out of being Tranksea, because it gives you such bad marks that, like, there's this thought of there's so little that anyone could do to, like, wipe themselves clean from the bad luck that is tanking their book. But, like, so, like, that's a setup for the thing. But just the idea that everyone there owes Daja. And then they're forced to interact with her just right at the end, because they spent this whole book ignoring her, and then she just saves lives. And then all of a sudden, they're like, oh, we didn't want to owe the only are a group of people that we don't acknowledge in our culture. You're the only people in the outside world that we just don't talk to because you were kicked out, kind of, and oh no, now we're lower than you because we owe you. What? How could we ever? It just, that whole thing just is so vindicating to read. And it's so funny. It's so objectively funny. I'm not going to spoil what it looks like, but if you read that last scene and you literally picture what this would look like, there's enough description that you can do that. It's hilarious.
Yeah.
And it's great. It's very cathartic to read after reading all of Daja's stuff that she's been going through for the last
100%. And Daja gets all upset about it because she's like, no, stop that. I'm very uncomfortable. I'm just like, no, let it happen.
No, it's uncomfy. It's uncomfy because you didn't like me, and now you're like asking for my approval. Please no. And they're like, but I like it. It's great.
If you don't mind, I would like to talk about one other thing that I experienced as a reader while reading Daja's experience.
Okay.
This is not in the text, and it's not something that is... I'm trying to figure out how to word it. Daja's experience as Trangshi, for me, stirred up a lot of feelings about being a person whose identity is rejected by a community.
Okay.
I personally was raised Roman Catholic, and my household growing up was intensely racist, homophobic, transphobic, you name it. That was the environment I grew up in. And I am a queer person. I am also a person who is now questioning my gender identity. So going through that experience while reading this, especially, and knowing what my father was like growing up, it made me feel a lot of things about being a member of a community and knowing that your identity is not accepted by this community. And I was fortunate enough to have read the writing on the wall and removed myself from that community, like, of my own personal choice before I got heavily invested in it. But there are people out there who are queer and who are still, like, part of religious communities and love their religious communities, which, that's not a criticism. I love that you love your community. But it's still hard for them because their communities look down on them. But not you. You're different. Wank.
Uh-huh.
And I just have a lot of feelings about it. I don't have anything really, like, really enlightening to say about it. Just that if you're a person with those experiences, you may feel some things while reading this book.
Especially the, like, you don't get to leave, but we also don't want you to stay feeling.
Like, there's...
we just want you to be different.
Nobody leaves the traders until we kick you out.
And even then, you have to follow all the rules about how exactly you're not in.
Yeah.
You have to be kicked out in the right way, too. Like...
Just have a lot of feelings, okay?
What's up, everybody? It's your boy, Zach.
It's Josh. Zach, do you enjoy video games, drinking, and attempting to solve the world's problems through ridiculous schemes?
Yeah.
Do you think others would enjoy that?
I mean, I really hope so.
So do I. So I think you all should come spend some time with us, the Midwest Meltdown. This show was created by these two fine gentlemen here, myself and Zach, when we spent the last 14 years telling each other funny stories, talking about video games, and literally anything else that comes to mind. We wanted to turn our passion for gaming into something that we could share with everyone. So again, follow us, the Midwest Meltdown, anywhere you can find your podcasts. That's Spotify, Apple Music, Podbean, Google Pods. Check us out. We'd be happy to have you.
On to the wrap-up and ratings. For the gratuity rating, for child abuse, this is backstory.
Yeah.
Like, backstory, and we're getting told about a thing that happened before the events of this book in about as calm of a way as you can possibly discuss the thing that this is. All on board with that.
Yep.
Yeah. I also want to say backstory and severe.
Well, remember, this is not what the thing is. This is the how it is depicted, the level of detail. And this is the level of descriptions. I would say it is backstory, and it is mild. It is. I would say that it is backstory and mild.
It's his reaction is not mild.
Okay. Can we meet in the middle at moderate? Like, I really don't think it's severe. He is, as, to me, it's like he's keeping himself, like, as calm and measured as he can possibly be. There's, like,
right,
the
but that
minimum
goes into
level of
care, not into this.
I really don't feel like it's severe. Can one of Daja or Anna, MJ, appealing to Daja to help?
I don't think it's severe either.
Daja's the authority.
I don't think it's severe either because even though Frostpine's initial reaction is very gutting, when he does tell us about what actually happened, when he's actually giving the details, he doesn't go deep into the details. He gives you what you need to know at face value so that way you can understand what happened to him without taking you all the way back to the trauma as deeply as he could. So I would say moderate.
When I was saying severe, I am thinking specifically of his exact reaction to finding out what happened. Like the moment in the scene where he reacts.
I'm gonna go reread it.
Maybe it only read as severe to me because men yelling?
Yeah.
Yeah, because, I mean, that's
I don't want to describe
severe
what happens, but that's the moment I'm talking about.
Yeah, I feel like literally that he yells, but then he, like, immediately is more measured and controlled. Because if we say child abuse severe, like, that paints a picture that is very different from what is in the book. And I want to, like, accurately convey the emotional shape of what you will encounter with reading this. And I feel like I'm okay with saying moderate, but I do not think that this portrayal is severe.
Yeah, I am not okay with saying mild.
Okay.
Just to bring in the text, Frostpine's reaction.
We can't read the text because this is the non-spoiler.
No, I know.
Okay.
I'm telling you what I'm reading from the text.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm not giving you a quote.
Okay.
Frostpine's reaction is distressed, and he does start to raise his voice, but it's very short, and instead of continuing on, he does go outside. So he doesn't actually yell at anyone, he doesn't lash out at anyone, he starts to get distressed, and then puts an end to it and goes outside.
Okay, then I'll put down, moderate.
Then for disability, I feel like in terms of the descriptions of like what exactly she's going through and what happened,
this is also backstory.
Yeah, it's backstory, and I do think moderate because it like talks about what this has done to her body, and we get like descriptions sprinkled throughout the book of how it is currently affecting her, but it's not a gory description of the thing. It's like keeping to, again, like the minimum needed to convey the severity of it without emotionally dragging through this description.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay. Ostracization.
Severe, and I will die on this hill.
No, I was going to say, I know you're going to say that, and yeah, this is severe. There's a lot of it. It's literally the point of the book.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, not trying to talk you down from that rating here. we're good. For the child abuse, what do we think? We talked a little bit about the way in which getting the story in this book informs other things. But as for exactly this, as a piece of backstory, integral, interchangeable, or irrelevant?
I would say interchangeable because I think you can drive the same point home with something else. But I do think it's important and appreciate that there are instances in the books that illustrate the severity of the situations that they're in and the consequences of those situations without putting the characters in those situations that we know and love and see on the page. So I think that something is important to have to say, hey, there's consequences to this sort of thing if you're not careful. Please promise me you'll be careful.
This also is a setup to another book later.
True.
And so I definitely agree. Like, it didn't have to be set up, but it gives real world, like, we walk into that other book already knowing, like, oh, we know how this happened.
Yeah, and I think it's important that there be something that outlines how important consent is in regards to your magic.
Mm-hmm.
It didn't necessarily have to be that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Disability.
I think it's integral for this particular character and for the experiences that all the characters around them have.
Yeah, I think the most you could have swapped it out was have it be a slightly different disability, but like...
Or a slightly different reason, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
it's still, the thing being is... Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think having disability as the reason does something that other reasons might not have been able to, which is important. And again, like the most you could do, I think, the most you could swap out, my feeling is that the most you could swap out is like exactly what kind of disability and what circumstances. And at that point, you just have this. It's fine. I think integral. It's integral to the plot for sure.
Yeah.
And then, the ostracization.
Integral.
That's the point. It's integral.
It's kind of like integral to the entire arc of all of the stories.
Yeah.
Not just this book.
Yeah.
Yeah. But even just within this book, it is integral.
Yeah.
It is, like, the point of the plot. Treated with care.
So just as a refresher on this one, because this is a weird one. Yes, it means it just is fine the way it was on the page. Enough means ow, but okay, essentially. Not enough is like, oop, nope, the author needed to do something a little bit different, and no just means like they didn't even try, essentially.
Yep. Yeah. So, do we think the child abuse was treated with care?
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah, I think, like, literally saying the minimum needed to convey the thing, and there's, like, a lot more that you could assume probably went with this, but what they actually have in the actual book feels like it's taking a lot of care. Even little things like him removing himself from the room rather than actually yelling, even just little things like that help a lot. Disability.
I think enough is my thought on this one.
Yeah,
I'd agree with that.
I agree with that.
Like, it's not written, and this is one of those where I think this particular trauma is intentionally not just treated with care, because I think this is one of those where that emotional impact on the reader, even without any personal experience in this thing, is so important that if it was just treated with care, I think it would be dismissive and lose its impact.
Yeah, it wouldn't land as hard.
Ostracization.
I think this is straight up treated with care, because almost as soon as we have the ostracization happening, we have things coping with it and working with it and mitigating it.
And things we talked about before, like Daja keeping complete control over certain aspects of the situation.
Retaining agency.
Yeah, and having, like, not the people who are ostracizing her, but other support networks who are calling out what is happening and actually including her and supporting her and caring about her. And she kind of gets almost damage mitigation in real time from her chosen friend family group. And so it's like it's definitely there. It's definitely happening. But
yeah, she gets a constant reminder that she has worth and value despite what she's experiencing that tries to contradict that.
And that she's not alone even if they don't want to be with her.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And validation of her feelings throughout. Like, none of the... I mean, occasionally, maybe some characters would be a little bit more flippant about it, but I feel like no one is ever, well, you have us, so you don't need to feel bad about these people not wanting you. There's so much care around validating her feelings, showing her that she has other places that she can go for support, but also recognizing that this is very painful for her.
Yeah. All right. Point of view for trauma and aftermath. I feel like it's really Daja for all of these. Like, yes, we do rotate viewpoints, but not as it relates to each of these three generally.
Yeah.
Like, the child abuse is Frostpine telling his story to Daja. Disability is mostly Daja interacting with Polyam.
Well, I would like to maybe push back against a blanket statement.
I was going to say, okay,
so taking the traumas one at a time. Here's my thoughts. Yeah. I'm just going to walk through them, and then I want you guys to tell me if you think I'm off base.
Okay.
So, with the child abuse, we don't see it on screen. It inherently cannot be Daja's point of view, and she is being told directly by the person who it happened to. So I would argue that the trauma is Frostpine's point of view, and the aftermath is Daja watching her teacher go through this.
You know what? You're right.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
And then
I was just thinking about Daja in that moment being the one to, like, hear about it, but you're right.
She's observing, but she wasn't there, and she is getting a first-person point of view from the person it happened to.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And then with disability, I think that Daja is the one who is observing and seeing, and we are seeing this happen in real time, but we never actually get a Polyam point of view, and we never see Polyam without Daja. Polyam leaves, goes off screen, does things, comes back into Daja's peripheral. So that one I do agree Daja's the point of view. However, I think that the aftermath is arguably Triss. Because Triss is the one that is kind of calling out and talking to Daja and being Daja's backup on so much of this book. And I actually want to argue, and Triss is the one who is the merchant child of a merchant who comes in and helps Daja with dealings and kind of intercedes between her and Polyam in a couple of moments when, like, this communication isn't happening, and we get Triss's upsettedness, and we also get Triss kind of going, I know that Polyam is also dealing with XYZ, but we get Triss's point of view on seeing what is happening, how it is affecting both characters a couple of different times. And this one, if we don't think it's enough for that to be a Triss thing, and if it's just Daja, that's fine. That's also okay.
You make a very good case for Triss. I just don't think it's just Triss. I think it is both Daja and Triss.
Okay.
I think we also just don't get a lot of Triss's perspective on it. We get a lot of Daja watching Triss call her out. Like, call
That's
it out.
That's fair.
Because I do think Triss does a lot of the aftercare, but I don't think that... I think that this book actually has a fairly marked lack of her perspective, all things considered, for being like an evenly dispersed.
I do think the ostracization is Daja and then Daja plus family. Plus found family.
I do want to circle back a bit on the Frostpine one, because I'm thinking about more of like how we have categorized things in the past, and we do not have Frostpine's point of view on the trauma. Like we don't have it from his perspective. No,
he's
with
literally the narrator.
No?
Yes.
Is he?
He's the one talking and saying...
He tells Daja what happened.
Yeah.
Okay.
And nobody else comments on it. Nobody else has information.
It is just the two of them on the balcony.
We see that conversation on screen.
Then how is that not Polyam saying what happened to her? How is that not Polyam's perspective in the same way? I'm saying it feels like there's a disconnect in how we've rated these.
Then it is.
Okay.
But my point was that I was thinking more about the aftermath on when I was laying the case for Daja.
Okay.
But I'm perfectly fine with that being Polyam.
Okay, I just trying to think of like stay consistent in how we've rated them previously.
No,
I don't think we've previously rated person tells main character a story.
We always have.
Okay.
I have our ratings in front of me. That is how we've designated that pretty much every single time.
Okay, I wasn't remembering it like that, but all right then. Then I think if it's Frostpine, it is also Polyam, because we have basically the same level of telling it.
That makes sense. I'm cool with that.
Okay. All right. So now moving on.
It's definitely a very Daja-centric book, but also.
Yeah, I mean, it is literally her book.
Well, but I mean Daja-centric in the way that like Sandry's book had a storyline about Sandry, but it wasn't just Sandry all the time.
Yeah, it was more split.
Yeah.
Okay, on to lighter things, like the aspiring writer tip.
Lighter? No, I'm kidding.
What does anyone have an aspiring writer tip for this?
I have one. I'm not sure how to concisely say it, but I think that this book really does a beautiful job with not just the descriptions of the external world, but the descriptions of the internal world and the experiences that each character has. And so I think that putting as much care into the emotional world and the mental world that characters occupy as you do to your physical world building creates for a much richer story.
Yeah, I like that. Favorite non-traumatic thing about this book? Anybody want to go first?
Okay, I hope this counts as non-traumatic. Which is always a great way to start this. I loved, because like I started reading this in like middle school. I was like, oh my goodness, how forest fires work and like what mast is and like
oh no.
You learned so much.
learned so many things. This is very exciting.
The magic school bus. The circle of magic school bus, as Anna has called it.
Yeah, like it's I mean like I don't remember if it was middle school or high school when I first read these, but like I think like I knew some of these concepts before because like I had learned it around the same time that like no, like yeah, there's a lot of fires in California, but trust me, it'd be worse if there were none.
Yeah.
And so like, but this kind of like really solidified that, and I'm like, this is why quick burns are very important, because we got to get rid of mast.
I made that point in another podcast we appeared on that was not ours about this book, when they were like, what is the point of this book for you? And I was like, I learned so much about fighting forest fires. And I'm not joking. Like watching people talk about the fires this summer, I was like, that's exactly what Rosethorn said.
Rosethorn was right yet again.
For me, it was Polyam and Daja forging a bond.
Oh.
Just their overall friendship as it evolved throughout the book.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is the food. Like, every time they brought up the traitor
I feel like
food.
it's always the food
I know.
for you.
Well, we've also talked about this particular book way more times than we've talked about the other books. But but yes, I think that just the food and the ambiance, I always in these books feel like my favorite non-traumatic thing is the quiet moments when they're all sitting around and doing their work or having a meal or generally just enjoying their life together. And we got a lot of really beautiful moments of that in this book. And a lot of it was centered around sitting down and having a meal together. And as someone who is a fan of regions where this cuisine seems to have been based upon, it made me really hungry, and I really liked it, and I want more. Because those are, like, cuisines I love.
Yeah, there's, like, loving descriptions of what is... I'm like, that's Mediterranean food.
Right.
Yes? Yeah.
I think, for me, I think the thing that I really, really love, which is actually similar to yours, but it's not strictly just the food. I am just so happy for Daja that she got a moment, or a couple different moments, of feeling culturally at home.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
Like, obviously, at this point in the story, like, her home where she feels wanted and loved and like she wants to be there and this is good and healthy and happy is the Winding Circle. Like, that is her new home, and she is still, like, that's where she feels at home. But culturally, there's a couple of different moments. One of them is the food. One of them is when they have the plant in the back of the caravan, where she gets to take a moment and go, yes, this is so familiar. And then she kind of comes back to, well, they don't want me to be part of it or whatever. But, like, she gets those moments of, like, this is how I grew up. And it really has, like, we kind of mentioned this earlier, it really has only been 6 months since that was her life. And, like, I don't want to say she's moved on. I do want to say she is creating a new home in Winding Circle, but, like, she gets to have that, like, this is my culture moment, and it's 110% about her and nobody else, and I'm very happy that she got that.
Oh. I thought I said mine.
Yeah, you said yours.
But you
Okay.
end our show.
I'm sorry. I zoned out. I'm sorry. Well, thank you. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for joining us for our coverage of Daja's book. We have 3 more episodes after this. We're doing this, like, kind of survey thing going through the series, because there's a lot of books in this series, and as you may have noticed, we don't normally do more than, like, 3 episodes. So this 4-episode survey of Emelan, where we're going to highlight each of the 4 main kids, and this was Daja's turn. So, thank you so much for joining us, Anna and MJ, and we will catch you in a fortnight. All music used in this podcast was created by Nicole as Heartbeat Art Co. and is used with permission.
You can follow us on Twitter at Books That Burn, all one word.
You can email us with questions, comments, or book recommendations at booksthatburn@yahoo.com.
Support us on patreon.com/booksthatburn. All patrons get access to our upcoming book list and receive a one-time shout-out.
You can leave us an iTunes review. This helps people to find the show.
And find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Thanks for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks.